about time to get started. I think I don't want to make you wait too long. We have a lot of people that are joining this session. So you're all muted. I will have to leave it that way throughout the webinar, but of course in your GoToWebinar control panel, you have a question area where you can ask questions as we go along. What I'll do is I'll try to keep an eye on that question box and perhaps already answer some of those questions as I'm giving the webinar. More than likely, it will be necessary to come back to some of them, which we will do at the end of the webinar or later on a one-to-one basis if you have specific questions about specific projects or things you're working on or anything like that. From an administrative point of view, we are recording this webinar as all of the webinars that we give. We record those and post the recordings on our website. I have included a slide at the end of this presentation that once more gives you the URL to that page where you can find all of the recordings. Okay, so I think it's about time to get started. The topic of this webinar is, on the one hand, very basic to the applications that we work with. On the other hand, it is something that keeps coming back and seen the very big amount of people that have registered for this. There still is a big interest in it and probably a lot of questions about it. So we thought it useful to organize one of these sessions around pre-flight standards, and specifically what we'll look at are the pre-flight standards for let me start the presentation for a second. Pre-flight standards from the ISO, and we're talking about pdfX and more than that. We'll talk about building on those pdfX pre-flight standards with the Ghent workgroup specifications. And what I will do, but that will be as a part of the explanation on ISO and pdfX and on the Ghent workgroup, what we'll do is also look at where can you find these specifications, where can you find these implementations of the specifications, so the profiles that you need to either check a file or convert it according to the standard. Where are those in pdfToolbox? And the other question, can I simply check according to the standard? Can I fix? Should I do one or the other? That's also something that we'll talk about as I show you things in the application itself. The last point is something that is often forgotten that it exists, but can be very, very useful, and that's the Ghent workgroup Proof of Preflight functionality. You find that functionality in pdfToolbox, but for example also in Acrobat. It is cross-application, and what I want to do is simply take a few minutes to show you what it is, what it can do in your workflow, and how you can use it. So on the one hand, I have some explanation here on the more theoretical background of some of these specifications and standards. On the other hand, I definitely want to have a major part where it is a demonstration of how to use these technologies inside of pdfToolbox and where you can find them, what the best way is to use all of this. So let's get started. I didn't want to have a too long theoretical part, but I do think it is useful to come back to what the ISO standards are and what the difference is perhaps between those. I think makes sense. And what I always do is use this drawing that you see on my screen, where you have the universe of PDF if you want. So that's the universe where you have all possible PDFs that you can create, and then you see a much smaller circle in there that represents pdfX. And why is that? Well, the ISO pdfX standard was developed to restrict the features or functionalities that you can use inside of PDF and restrict them specifically to those things that make sense in a graphic arts workflow. And what that does is it means that if you make a pdfX file, or if you check a file and it happens to be compliant to pdfX, then you're much more sure that that file will actually work correctly inside of a graphic arts workflow. Because all of the features that are either dangerous or unnecessary for graphic arts work are not allowed in a pdfX file, the pdfX file inside of a graphic arts workflow becomes much more reliable. pdfX is not the only standard that the ISO has created on top of PDF. You see a list of other standards mentioned: PDF-E for engineering, PDF-A for archival, PDF-UA for universal accessibility, and PDF-VT for variable and transactional files. And some of these standards are also important or becoming important in graphic arts workflows. PDF-A, for example, once in a while you see pop up because people not only need to print but also archive a PDF file. And PDF-VT, of course, in those kinds of workflows where you work with transactional data or variable data. But the most important, definitely in this context, is pdfX. So, like I said, I'd rather show you things than talk about it on a theoretical level. So let me switch to pdfToolbox in here. And what I'm using here is pdfToolbox, the desktop version, which is and the standalone version, which is a standalone application. You could do the same things inside of Acrobat, because pdfToolbox is also a plugin inside of Acrobat. And you could even do many of these things, especially checking for pdfX compliancy, and then later the Gantt workgroup specification compliancy. You could also do these even in the Preflight plugin inside of Acrobat Pro. And the reason for that, of course, is that the Preflight plugin is actually made by Callas software and licensed to Adobe. So let me open a PDF file in here. And as we're talking about pdfX, the first thing that is actually important to notice is that if you look at the bottom of the window where I opened that pdfX file, you have two pieces of information that are specific to a pdfX document. First of all, there is this pdfX1a label, and that means that the file that I just opened advertises itself as being pdfX compliant. Now, we haven't done any pre-flight at this point, so we can't be 100% sure that the file is pdfX compliant, but at least it contains the tag that says this file is pdfX compliant. So that gives us an indication of where that document comes from. And then the second piece of information is the name of the ICC profile that is used in the output intent of this file. Each pdfX1a file, each pdfX file in general, needs to contain an output intent. And that output intent tells you how the colors in that document have been created, have been separated. And in this case, the output intent contains a GWG, generic CMYK ICC profile. So for each PDF file that you open in pdfToolbox, if it is compliant to pdfX, you already have some very useful information at the bottom of the document. Of course, because there is no guarantee that this tag was applied to the document correctly, we do need to pre-flight. And you can find pdfX pre-flight profiles in two different locations in pdfToolbox. The first one is under the Tools menu. You have Switchboard. I've already opened it here. It's that iPhone-ish looking window that I have, and that has a button called Standards. If I click on Standards, it gives me on the first row of that window, it gives me 4 of the most commonly used pdfX standards. And the most important in this context, and it depends a little bit on geography where you are and what your workflow is, but the most important are probably at this point pdfX1a. That is the pdfX standard that is used in many of today's workflows, and pdfX4, because pdfX4 is the pdfX standard that is being proposed as the follow-up of pdfX1a. There are a number of fundamental differences between the two, and I'll only give you a few, but that is enough to make clear what the difference is and what could be most interesting for you. pdfX1a only supports CMYK and spot color, no other colors. It does not allow you to use color managed images and things like that. So it's relatively simple from the point of view of color in the file. It also doesn't allow features such as optional content or layers, as it is often also referred to, and many other modern PDF features are not allowed in that sense. So pdfX1a is a slightly, or pdfX1a is a slightly older pdfX standard, but it is, in fact, today still the one that is used in most workflows. So it's a very important one. The other one I mentioned, pdfX4, well, when I told you what pdfX1a does not allow, it's very simple. pdfX4 does allow all of these more modern features. It also gives you the ability to use color managed color in all kinds of different color spaces inside of a pdfX4 file. And like I said, it's being worked on. There are standards, amongst others from the Ghent work group, that are already built on top of pdfX4, but in most of today's workflows, those are not yet used. Now, this gives you only a small subset. It also doesn't show you exactly what will happen in here. You have very little detail. So what I'll do is I'll close the switchboard for now, and instead I want to go to Tools and open the Profiles window. And that Profiles window, let me bring that on screen and make it a little bit smaller. That Profiles window gives you the full list of all pre-flight profiles that are installed in this version of pdfToolbox. And some of these groups that you have here are things that I created myself, but what you will have in your version of pdfToolbox as well is something that is called pdfX compliance. By the way, you can also see these pdfE, pdfA, pdfVT groups, so these other ISO standards are also supported. We're focusing on pdfX at the moment though, so let me open up that group of profiles, and then you see two fundamentally different lists of profiles. You have those pdfX profiles that start with verify compliance, and then I have others that start with convert to. And as the name implies, these bottom profiles only verify whether a file is compliant to the pdfX1a standard or the X3 or the X4 standard. The items at the top will actually try to convert the file to that particular standard. So the bottom profile only runs pre-flight checks to verify compliancy of a document. The top profiles will also contain fixes and will try to fix a number of common problems in documents in order to make them compliant to a particular standard. As I said, the most used pdfX standard today is pdfX1a. So what I could do is take a pdfX1a profile, pre-flight profile. I'm selecting one that has ISO-coated v2 ECI as the output intent. So that is the ICC profile that will be embedded in that pdfX file as the output intent. And now I can go to Analyze and Fix, and that will run first all of the corrections in that profile, and then it will run all of the checks to make sure that succeeded. So let me call that pdfX1a, put that on my desktop, and I'll save that. What pdfToolbox shows you after that is that there are a number of fixes that have been used on this document, and that afterwards there were no problems found. So this is now really a pdfX1A document. And you can see at the bottom that this pdfX1A label is still there, indicating or advertising again that this is a pdfX1A file. But you can also see that the name of the ICC profile in the file has now changed. And it has changed to that isocoded V2 ECI profile that we selected in the pre-flight step. So for any PDF file that you have, with that built-in pdfX profile that you have in the pdfX compliance group inside of pdfToolbox, you can very easily check whether a file complies to the standard or convert it in one step to that standard that you have selected. Okay, let me close that document. We'll go back to the presentation for a second. So that was pdfX. And pdfX when people started to use PDF inside of graphic arts, pdfX was a very big step because, like I said, it restricts PDF to those things that at least make sense in a graphic arts workflow. However, what you find in graphic arts is that there are very different market segments throughout that very big market. You have large format, you have packaging, you have commercial work, people send advertisements, and in all of these different verticals or technologies or whatever you want to call it, in all of these different verticals, you have different requirements for PDF files. So only checking for pdfX1A will give you a more reliable document, but it still doesn't tell you whether that document is suitable for that particular vertical. At some point, a number of people started an international consortium of both vendors and industry associations, end user associations. And that group was called Ghent Workgroup, and the Ghent Workgroup created a number of standards or specifications that are based on top of pdfX. Those specifications restrict, again, what can be used in a PDF file, specifically to one market segment. So now you have the whole universe of PDF files. You have a first restriction that is done by pdfX to get all that functionality that is useful inside of graphic arts, and then you have a second restriction that is done by the Ghent Workgroup for a particular market segment. And that means, for example, that if you're using a PDF file to represent an advertisement for a newspaper or a magazine, well, the Ghent Workgroup has created a standard that tells you exactly how that PDF file should look. What the limits are, what the things are you can use and cannot use, what the things are you have to do in order to have a file that is suitable for its use as a newspaper or magazine advertisement, for example. So that provides you with an additional circle inside of that previous drawing where, again, you restrict pdfX and now down to that market segment. It's a very simple concept, and actually the implementation inside of pdfToolbox, again, is just as simple. There is only one thing that is confusing, and I'll tell you exactly what that is and how to avoid that confusion. But if I don't open the pdfX group in that profile window, but I go to prepress instead, then you get to see a list that is the list of profiles that are based on those Ghent Workgroup specifications. I talked about magazine ads and newspaper ads as an example. Well, you here have a magazine ads profile and there is a newspaper ads profile. And then if you click on those, you'll see that it says based on the recommendations of the Ghent Workgroup as defined in the specification newspaper ads 1v4. So these profiles inside of pdfToolbox, and again, these profiles are also available inside of the Preflight plugin in Acrobat Pro. These profiles inside of pdfToolbox are implementations of the Gantt workgroup specifications for the different market segments. The bottom line for you is that if you have a pdfToolbox, you don't have to go to the Gantt workgroup website and download any pre-flight profiles or anything like that from there. All of what you need is already built into pdfToolbox. And the only thing you have to do, and we'll do just that, is again open a PDF file. I'm using the same PDF file as before. And what I'll do is I'll select a profile, magazine ads, for example. And again, I can choose to execute either the checks in that profile by themselves or to execute both the checks and the fixes. In this case, there are no two different profiles that were created. There is one profile that contains both checks and fixes, and by either selecting Analyze or Analyze and Fix, I can now choose whether I want to do those fixes or not. Let me execute those for a second, and we'll call that magazines, and I'll save it on my desktop again. What you'll see is that the result now is slightly different. And that's a very good example of why you have that restriction to PDFX, and then you have another restriction to a particular market segment. This profile comes back with a warning and an error. The error is the thing with the red cross in front of it. The warning is the yellow exclamation mark. Why do I get the warning? I get the warning because there is an image in this document that has a resolution between 150 and 225 dpi, and the Gantt workgroup has decided that if you're in the magazine ads business, that resolution for images is on the edge. It's probably usable, but we are giving you a warning so that you can look at the document and decide whether it works in your workflow or not. The Gantt workgroup has also decided for magazine ads PDF files that spot color is not allowed. In a magazine ads PDF file, you are not allowed to use spot color. In this file, there is spot color, and so you get an indication of where it is used, and you get an error message so that that file would be stopped at the pre-flight stage and would not go to the next stage in your workflow. Can I see where that spot is? Well, yes. For example, I can use the separations view inside of pdfToolbox, and that would show me that indeed there is a Pantone color in here, and that Pantone color is in the text on the document. But the most important point is that I now have an automatic way to check that PDF file and to make sure that for the purpose I have for it, an advertisement in a magazine, it is not correctly created. The difference between what I did now and what I did before is that PDF X1A by itself, the pre-flight we did before we did this pre-flight, PDF X1A by itself doesn't say anything about spot color. It's only when you restrict to the magazine ads profile from the Gantt workgroup that you get an error. So this is a valid PDF X1A file, but it is not a valid file to use in a magazine ads workflow. In this list of profiles, you have all of the different standards or specifications that the Gantt workgroup implements. I have magazine ads, I have newspaper ads. There are profiles here for sheet fed offset, web offset, different resolutions, and so on. There are also two very different levels of specifications that are included here, and that is very important to realize and for you to select the correct specification. There is something that is called magazine ads, and there is something that is called magazine ads GWG 2012. And if I click on that one, it says this is based on the Gantt workgroup specification as defined in the 2012 specifications. What is important to realize is that specifications, of course, evolve over time. And the specifications that the Gantt workgroup initially released are specifications that are based on pdfX 1a. That's the specification we just used, and that's why the file ends up with a label pdfX 1a. That Gantt workgroup specification is built on top of pdfX 1a. The second thing you have here, these specifications that are labeled Gantt workgroup 2012, those specifications are specifications that are built on top of pdfX 4. And pdfX 4, as I explained, is the more modern standard. You can certainly use these Gantt workgroup specifications if you want in your particular workflow, if it makes sense in your particular workflow, but you have to realize very clearly that those specifications will allow a number of features that may not work in your particular workflow or in the workflow that you have at the printer, for example. Because they're based on pdfX 4, they allow color management in some number of cases. They allow other modern features such as layers, and that may not always work as advertised. What is always best to do is to look at the country you are in, to look at what the local organizations in your region or in your country, what they give as a guidance in terms of what specifications should you be using. And as of today, almost everywhere the guidance is that you should still use these original specifications built on top of pdfX 1a. So if you're not sure about what you should do, the safest bet at this point is to use the older specification, unless you know very well that in your workflow, in the workflow with your printer, it will actually work better if you use the pdfX 4 specs. In both cases, however, it's just as easy. You simply choose one of the specifications that you have here in the list, and you use that specification to either check your file or check and fix your file. You have some of these specifications in here that very clearly mention verification. They also mention pdfX ready. These are actually also specifications that are derived from the Gantt workgroup, but they are specific to the pdfX ready organization that in Switzerland adopts the Gantt workgroup specifications for use in Swiss workflows. If you're not certain what you're doing, then simply click on one of these specs and read the description. It is usually fairly clear what is in there. So this tells you how to either check or fix a file so that it's in accordance with one of the pdfX standards, and how to do the same thing so that is in accordance to one of the Gantt workgroup specifications or standards. There is one last thing that is that I didn't talk about yet, and let's return to the presentation for another second, and that is actually something that you can use on top of a pre-flight specification, on top of a standard. It's called Proof of Preflight, and it is a standard that has been developed by the Gantt workgroup, is described on the website of the Gantt workgroup, and where you can embed information about a preflight that you have done. So the workflow in this case is that you decide which preflight profile you want to use. You perform that preflight with the preflight profile that you've selected, and then you embed additional information inside of the PDF file so that someone who opens that PDF file later can very easily see information about what happened to that file, how it was pre-flighted, what the result was of that pre-flight, what the specific pre-flight profile was that was used, and even what application was used to perform that pre-flight. So it's an additional verification, if you want, that you can use on top of that document. All of that information is stored in XMP in the specific metadata format that was developed to store metadata in PDF, but also in a whole range of other file formats. And that means that the information can very easily be retrieved from the PDF file by any application that can read XMP in documents. And that opens it up for all kinds of interesting automation. And on top of that, the PDF file becomes digitally signed once you insert the proof of pre-flight information as well. And that also is important because it means that I can pre-flight a PDF file and then prohibit that someone changes it afterwards without me knowing. Once I digitally sign the PDF, if someone then comes in with an editing tool and opens up the file in Illustrator, for example, and changes something, then the digital signature will be broken, and any tool that is proof of pre-flight compliant will be able to tell me that, yes, this file might have been pre-flighted, but since then someone changed it. So really you should re-pre-flight it. And it is a true Gantt workgroup standard, which means that it's not limited to one vendor or one implementation. You can actually use this across different applications. Now, that sounds rather theoretical in a sense, so let's see if we can use it. We go back to pdfToolbox, and what I will do, we'll use the Gantt workgroup specifications, but I'm going to use a newspaper ad specification now. Let me close this one and reopen the original document. There we go. I'm going to use the newspaper ad specification because normally, as far as I know, this document, it should not create any errors. This is actually in accordance to that newspaper ads spec. So I select that, I say analyze and fix, and then I will give it another name, newspapers. Let's call it newspaper ad. Save that on my desktop. And you can see a number of things. First of all, the preview changed a little bit. That's normal because what I inserted now as output intent was or is an ISO newspaper ICC profile that has its effect on the color or how the color is rendered here. I see some additional other warnings in here. Something about a spot color name, something about a text, and of course that is because there are differences between the Gantt workgroup specification for magazine ads and the Gantt workgroup specification for newspaper ads. Each market segment has its own rules. That's exactly why the Gantt workgroup creates these different specifications. So it's normal that I see that. It's also normal that I don't have an error message anymore. The error message occurred because I had spot color in the document. I still have spot color in this document, but the newspaper ad specification allows the use of spot color, so that doesn't cause an error. Now, we already knew that we could do this. We can see our little tag at the bottom for PDFX1A and the name of the new ICC profile that I have in here. What I haven't done now is use the proof of pre-flight feature. And I have a certify button here in this window. And let me click that. Let's That's a warning message that I'll just ignore for now, and I'll give it a new name. I could just use the same document, but I'm going to save it under the certified name. Put that on my desktop. And now what I get is something that looks very much the same, but at the bottom here, I not only have that PDFX1A label, I now also have a proof of preflight label. And if I click that, it opens up a preflight certificate window inside of pdfToolbox. Now, all of the information in this window is very important. You actually have three different sections, and I want to explain what each of these three are, because if you don't understand what's going on here, this proof of preflight system doesn't make much sense. At the top section that you see here, you have all of the information about the preflight that was performed. This has been preflighted. There were no errors. There were 4 warnings. There are no informational messages. The profile that was used had as name newspaper ads, and the fingerprint of that profile, and that's that long number that you see here, or text string that you see here. What is that fingerprint? Well, that fingerprint is a unique ID for the profile that was used. So even if someone else creates a profile that is called newspaper ads, if that profile has different settings, has different things that it checks or different things that it fixes, then that unique ID, that fingerprint for the profile will be different. So this is a way to uniquely identify the profile that was used during preflight. After that, it tells me what the date is of that, that the preflight was actually done. So that is today and a few minutes ago. It tells me what the, and it's actually in GMT, so the hour is a little bit different. It tells me who created that information. So who created this preflight certificate that is stored inside of the PDF, and it tells me what the version is of the tool that created it. And the status in here is neither green nor red because there are warnings. So it tells you very clearly that during the preflight there were warning messages. The second part has a green label and says unchanged since signing. And that means that from the moment on that the preflight was done and this document was signed, it was not changed. If I would open this up in Illustrator and change the color of some of the text, for example, save the PDF again, this would become red and very clearly state that the document has been changed. So that part is very important as well. And then the third part says known profile. And profile is exactly the same as newspaper ads. And that tells me that the profile that was used to preflight this document is exactly the same as the profile that I have in pdfToolbox that is called newspaper ads, which is normal because that's what we use. But if I now sent this document to you and you didn't have that newspaper ads profile, or you would have modified your copy of that newspaper ads profile, then it would tell you that the profile in the document is not a match to any of the profiles that you have. So that gives you a way to verify what the person that preflighted the document has done. Okay, let me close that. I want to show you or want to make it abundantly clear that this information is actually stored in the PDF. And there are 2 ways I can show that. The first one is inside of pdfToolbox. I have under Tools, I have the ability to say Explore Metadata. And Explore Metadata shows me a nicely structured view of all of the XMP information inside the PDF. I have the document information at the top here, and then grouped, I have each of the different pieces of information that are found inside of the XMP. And you can see that there is a group here that is called Proof of Preflight, and that shows me that same information in a slightly condensed form. But this is basically the same information as what I find inside of that certificate window that we just looked at. So the information was in fact embedded inside of the document. And the last thing that I want to do here is to close this document in pdfToolbox. We'll hide that. Let me take that document that we saved that was certified, and what I'm going to do is open that up in Acrobat Pro. If I do that, I get an immediate warning that there is a signature in here that has problems. And the problem is that it's not verified. When I go to signatures, you can see that there is a signature that was signed by Callas software, signed by Preflight ticket signature, and the email address is info@callassoftware.com. So this is the digital signature that I talked about. And because I have not said that this Preflight ticket signature is a valid authority to sign signatures in my workflow on my computer, it tells me that the signature was not verified as being authentic. You can change this by saying that you trust this signer, and then from that point on, this will show up as a valid signature. But this shows you that there is indeed a digital signature that has been applied on the document, and you can see all of the details of that signature. Even more important, Acrobat has a section that talks about standards, and that's also here at the left-hand side. When I open that up, there is a section on conformance that identifies this file as compliant with ISO 15930-1, that's the pdfX standard. And it says not yet verified because it only looks at the tag, same as pdfToolbox does, and it hasn't pre-flighted this yet. It also identifies the output intent that is used in that pdfX file. But it also identifies a second section for this document. It tells me that there is a pre-flight audit trail. And pre-flight audit trail is the term used by Acrobat to refer to this proof of pre-flight information that is in the document. And it gives me the same information. This has a profile name that was newspaper ads. That's the name of the profile that we used. The profile was created and the pre-flight was done by Callas pdfToolbox, version 7.3, and then the result is warning or info. So there was actually a warning message as the file was pre-flighted. And modified is set to false, meaning that the document was not changed. So what this shows you is that not only is the information embedded in the XMP information of the document, it shows you that it is also recognized by various applications because it is this Ghent workgroup standard that is implemented by different vendors. And of course, I could now open the Preflight plugin, or I could use, again, the pdfToolbox plugin inside of Acrobat to pre-flight the file and confirm that it is actually in accordance to that, specification. But because I have the digital signature, in reality, I don't even need to do that. I know it has been pre-flighted, and I can trust that the document has not changed afterwards. Okay. Let me go for just a second to the GWG.org website. We've been talking about the ISO. You probably know the ISO standards organization, those pdfX and other PDF-based standards. And in fact, PDF itself are an ISO standard, so you will find information about those standards on the website of the ISO. For everything that has to do with the Ghent workgroup, in pdfToolbox, that were those profiles that you find under prepress. You can find all of the information about that on the Ghent Workgroup site itself. That contains the more technical information about the pdfX1A based specifications and the pdfX4 based specifications. Unless you're very technical and working for a vendor, you might not want to read that. But it also, for example, includes, and let me actually show you that very briefly, it includes these application settings, which is a section on the Ghent Workgroup website where for a number of vendors and a number of applications, let me see if I can find pdfToolbox in here. For a number of vendors and a number of applications, I can get prepared application settings that you can download to use pre-flight profiles, for example, in that application. As I explained, both in Acrobat and in all of the recent versions of pdfToolbox and pdf Pilot from Callas, you don't have to do that. Those profiles are already embedded in the application when you install it. What is interesting, however, and it's too broad of a topic to go into much detail now, I think that would be a good topic for a follow-up webinar. But what is very interesting to realize is that there are also, if I go to Adobe, for example, I could say, let me just search. There are also application settings on here. I should select something that makes sense. So if I go to Adobe, I could look for InDesign. There we go, and then do search. There are also application settings that will help you to create a good PDF file from different applications. Of course, it's good to be able to pre-flight a file and to prove that it's either compliant or not compliant. But even before you get to that stage, it's very important to be able to create a good PDF file. And on the Ghent Workgroup website, under Resources and Application Settings, you will find a list of application settings such as PDF settings for InDesign that will help you to make a good PDF file according to one of the specifications of the Ghent Workgroup. So if you have designers that you work with that have to create files, for example, for newspaper ads, then the best thing they can do is download the newspaper ads application setting from the Ghent Workgroup website, and that will give them specific settings for the transparency flattener, for the PDF output settings inside of InDesign that will help them to make the best possible PDF out of their InDesign document. And that in turn will ensure that that file has a good chance to pass through pre-flight at a later stage of the workflow. So I don't want to go into more detail at this point. It's a topic that is a little bit more on the creative side than on the production side. I think we'll follow up with a webinar that talks a little bit more about this creative side of the whole picture. Just remember that you have on the Ghent Workgroup website, you have these application settings that can help you to create good PDF files as well. And while you're on the Ghent Workgroup website to look at these application settings, also take a minute to look at the other educational resources that are here. And for example, the information about different job tickets for different markets, also test suites to test whether your workflow or your equipment is configured correctly. Okay, let me go back to the presentation. That's the last thing I wanted to talk about, so that concludes our webinar. If you have any remaining questions, please enter them now into the questions box or send them to us later. I have included a slide in the presentation, as I said in the beginning, that lists a number of support and more informational websites, the page with all of the tutorials, the page for the Gantt workgroup, where you can start finding those application settings and test patches and so on, some email addresses to contact us. What we will do is post a recording of this webinar online. You'll get a notification of that once the recording is posted on this support.4pees.com/tutorials page. And what we also do is we post the PDF version of the presentation on that page as well. So you'll have access to these links that you see here in the presentation as well. Let me have a look at the questions and see if there are any additional questions that I have not answered. I talked about the PXR in the profiles name, which refers to PDFX Ready, the Swiss Industry Association. There's a question about the Gantt workgroup's recommendation for packaging. It's a very good question. If you look at the regular specifications, then those are for advertisements and for commercial work. However, the Gantt workgroup has a packaging subcommittee that has been working on packaging specifications for a number of years. You'll find the result of that on the Gantt workgroup website as well. And what you'll also find there is more information on what that subcommittee is actually working on. And if you are in packaging, I would encourage you to check that out, as it's quite interesting. The latest work that is being done, for example, is work on standardization of the names of optional content groups or layers inside of PDF files used in packaging workflows. So this is a group that works specifically on packaging issues. If you're interested to know more, just send us a short email. There is a working group around packaging that you can very easily join, that does a lot of the work and the discussion through email lists, but that also meets 3 times a year when the Gantt workgroup meets. So if you're interested in that, just send us an email and I'll forward that to the right people. One other question in here. What is your point of view regarding fixes and checks? Do you recommend a company to auto-fix or just check and reject if errors are identified? I was very afraid that I would get this question. It's a very good one and a very obvious one. The point of view of the Gantt workgroup is the following, and then I'll tell you what I think of that. But the point of view of the Gantt workgroup is that the specifications of the Gantt workgroup are actually file specifications. That means that the Gantt workgroup committees decide how a PDF file that is used for a newspaper ad, for example, how that PDF file should look, which rules it should obey. And by definition, that means that the Gantt workgroup specifications talk only about checks. All of the work that the Gantt workgroup does, all of the discussions that are being held, all the discussions are around which checks should we do, so how should the file look, and by extension, which pre-flight checks do we need to verify that the file indeed conforms to that standard that we've set up. So as far as the Gantt workgroup is concerned, the only thing that is standardized are the checks, and that's very important to realize. However, most of the vendors that implement the Gantt workgroup specifications feel that there is substantial additional value in also fixing files. And there are a number of reasons for that. First of all, if you would take 1,000 files and you would run them through a Gantt workgroup preflight profile, and you would only check them, then probably the vast majority of them would fail. And there is a very good reason for that. The reason is that a pdfX compliant file needs to have a certain amount of administrative information in it. That tag, for example, that identifies it as a pdfX file. Well, most files don't have that. So a lot of the fixes that you see in the callas profiles, for example, have to do with getting the correct information in the file for basic pdfX compliancy. On top of that, there are a number of fixes that the vendor, in this case callas, thinks make sense. So the statement from the Gantt workgroup is that you should only check, or at least that as Gantt workgroup is concerned, we only talk about checks. But the different vendors that implement those specifications typically select a number of fixes that the vendor feels make sense in a particular workflow. Whether you feel that those fixes make sense or not is a totally different story and is totally up to you. And of course, applications allow you to, it's not what I wanted to do here, applications allow you to, if I go back to pdfToolbox and I open up one of these profiles, well, applications typically allow you to see the list of fixes that is done and to modify that list. You can either add new fixes to here or you could remove fixes. So you have the liberty to do that. Should you do only fixes, or should you do only checks, or should you also fix the file? That's really not a question you can answer on a generically. It depends too much on the workflow that a particular printer or publisher has implemented, and it depends too much on the relationship you have with your customers. Of course, everyone knows that doing a fix on a document makes you assume some responsibility. If the fix goes wrong, the customer can turn around and say, you fixed my document, it's your fault, you're going to pay for it. But in the end, there is usually a compromise, and what you'll see is that the fixes that you find in the callas pdfToolbox profiles, for example, have been selected to be low-risk fixes that make sense for a vast majority of the files and that will almost never generate any problem in the document. And that is probably a very good thing to do. It is a compromise between only checking and fixing. And where exactly you put the balance is something that you have to decide looking at your own workflow and looking at your own customers. What is the use of batch? I'm assuming that you're referring to, in the switchboard, you're referring to the possibility to run batch. This is nothing to do with the profile by itself, so it's not really a standardization issue, but this simply allows you to do a function inside of pdfToolbox, either preflight or any of the other correction functions that you have, to perform that function on all files that are in a particular folder. So instead of opening a file and preflighting it manually as I did here, I can open pdfToolbox and run a preflight profile, for example, on all files that I have in a particular folder. Of course, there are also solutions that will allow you to automate all of that functionality with hot folders and so on, or integrated into a website, but that would take us a little bit too far. On the tutorials page, you'll find a number of webinars that talk about the other features of pdfToolbox, such as the batch possibility and the server possibility. Are there prepared profiles specifically for digital printing? That's a very good question. Not really. In most cases, from the Gantt work group at least, in most cases you don't really have digital printing profiles. In most cases, you'll see something like the sheet offset CMYK profiles being used, and those typically work fairly well. pdfToolbox by itself does have a profile, and I'm looking for where that would be. pdfToolbox has two prepared profiles actually for digital printing that you could check out, but those are not profiles that are standardized or that are based on a standard from ISO or Gantt work group. Can I compare a original file and a processed file visually? Yes, actually you can. If I, for example, open up the original file here and I would take that, I don't know which one we take. Which one is this? The magazine's PDF file. So you can see that they are different. If I do compare documents, this one will give me a difference for just about the whole document. That's because I had a color change in this one, a change of profiles. But this is a comparison in pdfToolbox that is based on a rendering of the document. So if I lower the sensitivity a little bit, then it discards that color difference that there is and tells me there are no differences. But it does give me a way to compare what was done here. What we often tell people is that it's a very good idea if you have profiles that you run, if you have fixes that you run on files, it's a very good idea to make sure that nothing happened to the file that you don't like. And the visual comparison engine in pdfToolbox can help you with doing that. I had a pretty broad question about webinars. The answer is actually simple. Yes, we also have webinars about a number of other topics. You'll find the full list on that last slide in the document, the page about tutorials. There you find all of the webinar recordings, both for pdfToolbox and a number of other okay, so that I think I covered all of that. I have one remaining question on, is there a link to a French recording of this webinar? No, we haven't done that. We haven't done this one in French yet. The next one will probably be in about 2 weeks in a Dutch version, and at some point we'll probably do a French version as well. But at the moment it's only English, and it's the English recording that will be posted on the website to begin with. Okay, that concludes all of the different questions that I can see here. If you have any other questions that you want to ask, simply send me a short email. You have the email addresses here again. Send us a short email and we'll be more than happy to help you with any of that. Thank you very much for attending. Take advantage of the other webinars that you find online, and I'm sure I'll see you again in the future in another webinar. Have a great day.